Hi everyone, and welcome to our hillside allotments apiary, where we've got one of our Honeypore Polystyrene Langstroth hives and a couple of nukes. This is part of our ongoing series of videos that have been sponsored this year by Honeypore, who have supplied us with a range of their equipment to demonstrate and to use in our apiaries. And the poly hives I'm really pleased with. We've had them for a couple of seasons now. First from the guys at Modern Beekeeping, and then subsequently from Honeypore Direct, and I really like the way they work. I like the lightness of them. Obviously, being a sufferer of bad backs, I find them quite easy to lift and manoeuvre. And what we have today is queen introductions. So we've had the full-size hive. This was actually a swarm, and we shook them into the bottom box, added a feeder, and the feeder that goes with them easily holds one of the 14 kilogram jerry cans that we use. We fed them really well, and they drew out the foundation, the frames of foundation, so quickly that we added a second deep box. So here we've got the floor and two deep boxes with a migratory roof on it, and the migratory roof just has a flat side. It's not like a standard roof that fits down over the edges. And we've been looking to increase the number of colonies that we have in the Honeypore hives. Now, being Langstroth and our traditional colonies being in commercial and national hives, the frame sizes are different, so it makes it a little bit awkward trying to move maybe some frames from a commercial into a Langstroth. So the best way to do it is to get the bees to draw out some additional frames for us, and then to use those and put them into the nuke boxes. And yesterday I came across, opened up the full-size hive and took out 4 frames for each of these nukes. So now we have 2 nuke boxes that are queenless. They may well have produced some queen cells, but we can take those down and then we can introduce the queens into these, and we'll come back and show you how that introduction has gone. So first of all, we'll have an inspection of the full-size hive. We'll go through this. The top box is going to have mostly frames of foundation because that's what I put in yesterday. And we'll just bring the camera in, we'll go through the inspection of this hive, and then we'll turn our attention to the 2 nukes and introduce the 2 new queens into these 2. So I'll just loosen off the strap. To be honest, the strap at this time of the year isn't really needed. The propolis that the bees create holds down the roof quite nicely. So as I said, we've got mostly foundation in this top box with a couple of frames. These deep boxes take 10 frames, and so with the nukes only having 4 frames in each, there were a couple of frames that were left over, and I'll work from this side so that we can avoid me stepping in front of the camera. So this is one of the frames that they've been working on, but the queen hasn't laid in that one. And then we've got another frame here which does have some brood in it, and the queen's laid a few eggs in this, but I suspect with all the commotion yesterday, she's going to be back down in the bottom box. Interestingly, we've also been experimenting with plastic frames this year. I know plastic has got a bit of a bad rap at the moment, but I've not actually done terribly well with these. The bees haven't drawn the comb out the way that I wanted them to, typically, and I think it's because I didn't put enough wax on the base foundation shape pattern to encourage them to draw it. So where there is a reasonable coating of wax, they've drawn it. This is in some of the other colonies, But where I've missed sections, been a little bit too frugal with the wax, unfortunately we've ended up with a situation where they've just left big sections without any drawn comb, and so we're going to go back to the drawing board with that and try it again. But you can see the size of the frames. They're quite a nice large frame. They have relatively small lugs on the top, but they're not so deep. If you've seen some of the other videos that we've produced on the Patreon page, we've got the 14 by 12 national brood boxes, and they come out so far and then you have to keep going with them, and I'm not really a huge fan of those. I prefer the slightly wider frames. So we'll just take this box off and then we can get down into the bottom box and carry out an inspection and see what's going on. Again, I have a gap on the opposite side to where I'm working, and I would normally start with the gap side. Smoker's working really well today, but we'll work from the opposite side just to make it easier for the camera. So bees are working across quite nicely. They're starting to store. We've got quite a lot of blackberry and also sweet chestnut here. There's a giant tree just behind me that's loaded with flowers at the moment, the sweet chestnut. It's the first week of July, so if we get this out over the weekend, then it's American Independence Day at the weekend. So frames being drawn, they do tend to take to the wax foundation really nicely compared to the plastic, and that's down to me not doing a good enough job with the wax coating that I tried to put on. Lots of stores coming in. This particular site is fantastic for blackberries. We've a river probably half a mile at the bottom of the hill, and the banks of that river are surrounded by blackberries, so there's always a good supply of water for the blackberries. So we've got some brood. Another one of the issues I've had, which has really been self-created, is these frames have wire fixed to the frames, and then unwired foundation is embedded into those wires. I guess it's practice that you need to just spend a lot of time working out the amount of pressure and heat that you need to apply in order to get the wax to embed into the wires properly. But what has been happening is it's kind of had a bit of a wavy pattern because it's not fully embedded, where it isn't embedded in the wire isn't embedded in the wax. It's fallen away and caused a slight bow into the wax. Not a major problem, but it does make for slightly uneven comb, and that in itself can cause a few issues if you're moving frames around. The bees are a little bit fractious this morning. They're not the calmest they've been. That's probably down to the weather. It's a little bit cloudy and maybe a little bit stormy. We might get some showers. But they've done a great job with drawing out this, given that this was a swarm that we shook into this Honeypore Langstroth, and I have posted the video of the actual swarm that we collected as well, so it's worth just having a look at that. And the nice thing about the Honeypore hive is, because it was so light, I was able to just lift the entire hive underneath the branch that the bees were hanging from, and just shake them straight into the hive instead of going from the hedgerow into a box and then from a box into the hive, and they settled really quickly. So this is a 10 frame deep brood box, and you can actually just use one size with these, so you could go with the deep boxes. I suspect if they're loaded full of honey they'd be quite heavy, but you could also use the medium boxes, which would be quite a nice size to go with, and those I suspect you'd probably have to use a double brood, just because they're not quite deep enough really in my mind to sustain a full active brood box. Now, I've not yet seen the queen here, so still trying to spot the queen, but she is unmarked, and the reason they swarmed is because she was not clipped. One of the things that we've done this year is we've clipped our queens, and that's saved quite a number of swarms that we had, where the bees have then gone back to their parent colony. And if you'd like to know more about that, then do take a look at the Patreon page, because I've posted quite a number of videos showing the whole process of marking and clipping queens. So that's the last frame. I haven't seen the queen, but there's plenty of brood, lots of eggs in there, so they're developing nicely. This colony hopefully will move up and start using the box at the top. I think what we'll do is we'll just leave the colony as it is, and I'll pop this last frame, because it is just stores. We can pop that in at this end, and then we don't have to move all of the boxes around. So we can slide this in here. Just enough room to get them back in without having to shake the bees off. And that works really well. So that's a really good inspection of that box. Let's get the second box back on top. Just smoke the bees off so we don't crush too many as we put this box back on. And then I put it on at an angle and just ease it across, and hopefully that prevents squashing any bees. Get it nice and square, and then we can get the roof back on. With the migratory roof, you don't need to put a cover board on or a crown board. The migratory roof just goes straight on top of the top box, whatever that top box is. And you'll notice that we didn't put a queen excluder in there because we want all of the bees, including the queen, to come up into that top box, and hopefully she'll then start laying in the top box, and the bees will expand the brood nest across both boxes. And it might well be that we keep this box on over winter, and we overwinter them with a double brood box in effect, and then next spring we can just simply split it down into 2 colonies. So that's that inspection done. We'll just pop the strap back on the top just to keep it tidy, and then we can introduce some queens into these 2 small queenless nukes. So that's the main hive inspected. The next job is to get the queens that we've got into these 2 queenless nukes. We'll just get a little bit of smoke at the entrance of these. What we've got is a couple of queens in separate queen cages. The workers have been released, so there's just the queen in here now, and I've just grabbed a piece of bracken from the hedgerow to be able to suspend it. What we need to do is to just break open the little clip at the bottom here to enable the queen to be released. So now that's open, and it's important to make sure that it's bent right back so that she doesn't get stuck in there. And we can now open these up, give them a little bit of smoke, and get them set up with their new queen. So these are 4 frames. It's a Honeypore Poly nuke, Langstroth nuke, and the frames have come from this hive. So I'm just going to take out this second frame in. And we'll position our queen on one of these frames. And then we're good to go. So here's something that can quite easily happen when you're splitting up hives and making up nukes. The original queen is in here, and then we have 2 queenless nukes. But actually, that's not what's happened in this instance. Somehow, in transferring the frames over, the queen has managed to jump onto one of the frames that I've moved across, and she's actually on this frame. So we've got the queen unmarked and unclipped on this frame. I don't know whether you can see her, but you'll just have to trust me in saying that here's our queen. So actually that would partly explain why this colony is a little bit grumpy this morning, as well as the weather. It's because they're queenless. So what we'll do is we'll slide this frame back in, gently into here, and I can see the queen on this frame. So we'll get that back in there, and we'll leave those, and we'll pop one of the queens in this full-size hive and allow her to emerge. We can put it in the top box, so we haven't got to break it all the way down, but there's no need for us to go any further in this particular nuke box because we've got our queen in here. It's just one of those things that can happen, and knowing what to do, how to react to it is important. We could in fact split this down into lots of other nukes as well, but we only really wanted to take 2 nukes out of them. So we'll just move this across. I'm just going to reopen this hive, and we'll put her in the top box of this one. And as I say, we can come back and show you what's going on as we go through the next few weeks. So we'll just give them a little bit of smoke again, just to let them know we're back. Sorry about this, girls. I'll just take out one of the frames at the edge here so that we can ease her in without causing too much disruption. And we'll take a frame out that's got brood on it. And because these are queenless, they're going to start producing queen cells, and in fact it was interesting to see that they didn't have any immediate queen cells there. So we'll pop this in. Just move the bees away from there. We just need to make sure that the little catch there is popped open. We want the queen to be able to come out. I did it on that one, but not on this one. So we've got the escape route. The fondant is in here. The queen can now be released. We'll just pop that back into our frame. Just push that little stick in there. Let's just move it across here a little bit. Just ease the bees out from beneath it. And then we can pop that in. Now that's our queen in the hive, and hopefully they'll now be able to release her quite easily, and they'll then have a new queen in their colony to head up this colony for the rest of the summer and into the autumn. So now we move on to our other nuke, which now we're pretty certain will be queenless, because we've found the queen in the nuke. So it's always worth checking, because you could, well, one of the mistakes that can be made is that you end up introducing a replacement queen into a colony that you think is queenless, because maybe they've swarmed and the virgin queen has gone off mated but hasn't yet started laying eggs, and you therefore think that they're queenless, but in actual fact they've got a queen in there. So it's always worth double checking these things. So let's just take out again one of these frames. Now I know that there will be some eggs in here, because the queen was laying in a lot of the frames, so we'll just pull this one out. And they have started making some queen cells at the side here, so I'm just going to crush those down just to stop those from being advanced, and then we can pop our queen into this frame, secure her in place. We've popped open the entrance there, and then we can slide this back into this nuke. But what I'm going to do is just take this end frame out, just to make it easier for me to slide that frame back in, and we'll just have a quick look to make sure that there are no other queen cells. So just a quick look. No queen cells on this frame, and this end frame is food stores. So all of this brood is going to emerge, and although it's a relatively small colony in here, once the queen starts laying, they'll soon develop, and we'll be able to overwinter them quite nicely. Just make sure that we get the queen in position, and we can come back in a couple of days and make sure that she's been released. And again, we'll record some more video showing how these girls are doing. So I'm just going to shake these bees off, because I don't want them to get rolled as I put this frame back in, and then we can get our little poly roof back on, and that's that queen introduced into that colony. So there's our inspection and introduction of two queens. Fortunately, we spotted that I'd inadvertently moved the original queen into one of the nukes, and you know, these things happen, so it's always worth taking your time just to make sure that you've got everything set. And as I say, if you have a colony that you think is queenless, it's worth checking and giving it a little bit of time before you go out and purchase a new replacement queen, because you could have a newly mated virgin queen in there that is just about to start laying. If you've got any questions about the honeypore hives, then take a look at the honeypore website. There's a contact page on there. I'll put all the links to the various websites down in the description below, or you can contact me directly via my website, which is www.norfolk-honey.co.uk. And my thanks again finally to Honeypore for supplying us with all of the equipment that we're using in these videos, and we'll catch up next time. Thanks for watching.